Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's Natalie Alicia Gold with the Gold Standard, and I'm here with my dear friend, Dr. Regina Lark. Regina, hi.
Hey, it's so nice to see you. It's been a long time.
So great to see you, looking gorgeous as always, and thriving in COVID.
I am.
That's amazing. So,
Yeah,
Regina, tell us what you've been up to and who you are, what you do. Introduce yourself to the viewers.
thank you. Okay, so I am a Los Angeles-based uh, professional organizing slash senior move management slash hoarding. Hoarding remediation. I don't hoard. We help people who hoard, and we
I
do a
think I
lot.
need you for my husband, Regina, just FYI.
Sure. Happy to help. And then we also clear out estates when somebody has passed and the family wants to work on dismantling the estate and how to deal with the house and the contents, the tangible personal property. I like to tell clients that I'm one phone call to help them get from the sadness, help them get through that sadness and get the house on the market, dispose of the property, ship things to the families, whatever needs to happen.
Regina,
And
how did you get into this area?
well, there's a loaded question. So I have a PhD in history from the University of Southern California, and I just assumed my career track would be academic. And indeed it was for a very long time. And in the summer of '08, well, I had been hired, back up, my last job, which will forever be my last job, I was a director at UCLA Extension. And the challenge with that is that I had a supervisor who was very hard for me to work with, and it turns out I'm kind of a whistleblower, and so it wasn't a great match. And I had been looking for other positions about 8 months before I took a vacation to Jerusalem. And while I was in Jerusalem with a good friend, visiting a good friend, she worked at Hebrew University, and I called her up at work one day and I said, Nadra, I don't want to be a tourist. How about if I do your kitchen? And she says, oh, Habibi, I don't know what that means. And I said, your girls are in their 30s and you got sippy cups in the cupboard. Let me just see what I do. And so she was reluctant, but she let me, and she came home and it was a good result. I don't think anything of it. I'm back at my desk at UCLA Extension a week later, and I learned that my unit was being dismantled and my position eliminated, and it was July of '08, the beginning of the recession. And I had that moment of clarity where I realized that the goddess of jobs was doing for me what I could not do for myself.
Woo,
So
chills.
yeah, I mean, I did not have one moment of anxiety. I really didn't, because I thought, I'm in the land of opportunity. I have the highest degree in the land. And so what will that yield me? What I didn't know was that a recession had just started. And so 2 months into my layoff, I told my roommate, I'm going to organize until something better comes along. We looked up organizers online, and the first person to come up was Catherine Macy, PhD in chemical engineering. And I went, organizers are smart people. And Catherine knew my roommate really well in completely different context. We walked to her, she called her up, invited us for dinner. We walked to her apartment for dinner. Catherine told me everything I wanted to know about this world, hired me as an assistant, brought me to my first meeting of the LA chapter of the National Association of Professional Organizers. And I started my company. That was 12 years ago. The PhD now stands for Piled Higher and Deeper. And I've grown this incredible queendom. I'm very proud of it, and it's been fantastic journey.
You know, Regina, I am literally taking notes, which I rarely do, because it's such good. I mean, when you say the gods of jobs did for me what I couldn't do for myself, and I started my queendom, that is such powerful language. And I think we need more of that in the world. And I know that your background is very pro women, as am I, which is how we really connected. I mean, what a blessing that was handed to you on a silver platter, but you
Yeah,
had the right colored glasses to be looking
right.
at it from that perspective.
Yeah. I had thank you for acknowledging that. When I was a graduate student, I was hired by HBO to do research. Uh, it was called the F word. On F was stood for feminism, and the project didn't get made. But I spent 2 summers researching the historical, legal, social, cultural, um, uh, race-related, gender relationships in the United States from Betty Friedan's Feminine Mystique to the end of the defeat of the Equal Rights Amendment. So from 63 to about 82. And I developed these timelines for all these different practices. And I started a company called Real, REEL History, Historical Research for TV and Film. And I got as far as business cards. And that was it. I didn't know how to network. I didn't know what I was doing. But between that, I thought, oh, maybe I can do something different. And then writing a dissertation, which is all about original thought. It's all about creating something out of nothing. I was perfectly poised to start a business out of nothing.
It is so amazing how we have these skills and talents in our life that are truly given from the universe, and how half of life is just figuring out how to piece them together to make something.
Right, right. And you don't even know. I mean, I joke. The PhD now stands for piled higher and deeper. I'm in the thick of it, right?
Yeah.
Well, not so much anymore. I'm mostly the rainmaker. I'm not really out doing a lot of hands-on. But my doctoral research was on. I interviewed dozens of elderly Japanese women who had met and married American soldiers during the US occupation of Japan. So I had ease and affinity with older adults. And I do my research as a very outspoken feminist graduate student. And I was able to create a trust situation so that these women shared with me some pretty deep and intimate experiences of their lives as what the term we refer to them as Japanese war brides. So it was, who knew that the skills that I needed to do the research could be brought over to be developed into the skills I would need to work with older adults. You don't even think about it until you are now incorporating it. It's like, oh, there's a reason why I'm good at this.
You're born with everything you need, but
You
truly
are.
just, and I think really, Regina, I mean, you have, like you said, the highest degree possible in academia.
Yeah.
And in my perspective, and I've spoken a lot about this on different networks, etc., I think the academic model is quite broken.
I do too.
So how do we fix it, Regina?
The academic model. Oh my gosh. Well,
Not to put you on the spot or anything, just, what are the hardest questions out there?
well, it was never designed for family life. It was never designed. I mean, anything corporate, anything, and higher ed is corporate. These institutions, the legal institution, education, financial, none of them were designed for family life.
And for women.
Right. Well, and I'm trying not to label it, but but I'm doing a book right now on women, emotional labor, and getting organized. And I don't have a title yet, but emotional labor is this huge list of unwaged, invisible, undervalued, unknown, unappreciated tasks that are performed in the household, mostly by women, on top of the regular load of work. And so this idea of emotional labor, there's three components: emotional labor, the mental load, and the actual physical doing. So the emotional labor is, oh, I've got to get socks for the 3-year-old. The mental load is knowing what size socks to get. The physical part is going out and getting the socks. And so women tend to be the person of the adults in the household. The females will be the one that are carrying the weight of this. And we were told it's a labor of love. And we've been told that a woman's work is never done. So if a woman's work is never done, then how does she survive and thrive in a corporate setting? Because if it's never done at home, how the hell is she supposed to be at her optimum in the paid workforce? So the paid
Preach, sister, preach. I'm with you.
I know, the paid workplace was never designed for family life. And that, pink collar workers, there's so much I could say. Ugh. So when the corporate structure was designed, moving away from assembly lines, we're going to now have insurance industry, the legal industry, as industries develop. When they're coming online, the male adult would have a father-son relationship with the young man coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Let me show you what I did. I'm going to pay you a shit wage. You're going to apprentice, but I'm going to show you how to do what I do. Mm-hmm. When women began entering this workplace, the relationship changed from father-son to husband-wife.
Wow.
So that women become the pink collar workers. And they are regulated to coffee, note-taking, picking up the dry cleaning, buying a gift for the executive's wife, and all of that stuff. The workplace, in terms of structure, in terms of hours, never changed. As women come into it in droves, it never changed. Women continue to be the primary caretakers of the home. Now they're working for wages 40 to 60 hours a week. And then they're going home and continuing that work. It's the longest job description in history, right? It's 24/7. When you look at the gender division of labor at home, the tasks that are traditionally assigned to males are weekly or monthly, right? Lawn care, car maintenance, maybe yearly, clearing the garage.
Taking out the garbage.
Yeah, weekly, yeah, garbage. Picking up dog shit in the backyard. I mean, I don't know, but which would be daily. But the tasks that are generally assigned or stereotypically assigned to women, all day, every day. It's totally nonstop. So the workplace didn't reconvene in order to create a more equitable workplace. Because women, even if women in the paid workplace are, CEOs, CFOs, I mean, they've moved up, they're mid-level managers. It's really going to be the women in the workplace that say, oh, Susie's dad just died. We need to send around a sympathy card. 100%. So they're pulling the emotional labor, both in the unpaid workplace, right, the home, and the paid workplace, where they are deriving their income.
And Regina, I will also say that many of these women who have succeeded in wonderful ways in corporate America have done so and chosen not to have the other side.
Right, right. Or they've chosen to leave.
100%, right?
And in leaving, they've become really kick-ass entrepreneurs. You know? I mean, so you know, to circle back to higher education, I spent last summer. I was at the conference for the Western Association of Women Historians. I was on a panel of history PhDs who are no longer working in the academy, and I had not been around my former profession for the 12 years I've been a business owner. I was so blown away by the one conversation after another with these brilliant academicians, PhDs in such a broad scope of the history of the world, and they can't find jobs, tenure track. You know, they have family responsibilities and it's very hard to publish. I mean, people do it. I'm not saying it's impossible, but the cost to your mental health, to your physical health, to your family's health is tremendous.
Right. These are not slackers. These are the overachievers of our society.
Right.
All of a sudden having the rug pulled out from under them, and what was already a tight job market has been made exponentially worse with COVID.
Right.
I gotta tell you, Regina, I put out a search for contract paralegals and contract attorneys, and in 2 days I got more than 200 resumes. When I put out a search for a part-time advertising person or PR person to work for me freelance, I got about 150 resumes in 1 day. These are accomplished women.
Right, right.
And what the heck? I mean, really, I don't think that post-COVID, when this, ends, I don't think we can go back to the workforce in the same way. I mean, I just think that this has brought to the forefront how broken our society is, and how kick-ass these women can be at having, working from home and doing they do everything.
Right. Well, and I am very curious to see how quarantine has impacted traditional family life, where there are 2 adults and 1 or more children from adolescence to young adult, and maybe dealing, and then the sandwich part of the generation. So older adults, family life and small kids. And I don't know if this invisible labor is becoming more exposed, if husbands are going, holy cow, I didn't know she did so much. I've talked with couples a lot as I'm doing research for this book, and I ask them. I do a lot of networking, and I connect with some really cool, smart, enlightened men, dads, husbands, and I will talk about what I call my emotional labor project, and they are absolutely convinced, and rightly so, that they do a ton of work at home. They really feel that they are equal contributors, partners. So I give them the experiment of going home, telling their wives about this conversation, and then they both go into a different room and they write down everything they do. Just go crazy, just write it down, whatever comes to mind. The lists are night and day. You would not know it was the same 2 people living in the house, because the wife's list is, say, 1.5 pages long.
And his is 4 lines.
Yeah. Maybe half a page, but certainly not as detailed and as nuanced. And when he sees it written out, I think a lot of things are happening. One, holy cow, I didn't realize that was going on in the house. Wow, I would never have thought about that. I mean, it's mind-boggling. And I still hear clients, just the other day, my boyfriend says, well, since this is all your stuff, it's your problem. And I said, but aren't you a team? Isn't this a partnership? How come he's not saying, what can I do to help you?
Exactly. Like, I mean, that is all we want to hear, right? And what is it with men and women that we are simply not taught how to truly communicate? Because I think you're right, you know, and when you said that exercise, I knew what was going to be the result, because I would bet you if you ask my husband, he would think that he does as much as I do.
Yeah.
And I have also said to people, and I will say out loud in public, that our relationship works better when there's a third person, and that third person is the nanny.
Right.
And I was made to feel less than, because I knew that was, how can you be thriving as an entrepreneur, having clients, and also be 24/7 changing diapers? You need relief.
Right.
And for outside members of the family to make those kinds of judgment calls is
right.
so hurtful. So
right.
How do we, Regina, with your unbelievable experience, what are the words we can use to start having better relationships and communication in couples, so that in a post-COVID world, divorce is not at over 50%? And
right.
we're feeling heard, and women are thriving truly to the extent that they want to.
Yeah, it's a good question, because I don't really have an answer, and I hate that. What I will say is, I'm working on it, but here's what I'm assuming has been happening. I think couples, when they get together, and I'm going to say heterosexual couples, because research has shown that because when two women or two men get together, they cannot rely on traditional stereotypical gender roles, the gender division of labor. They have to talk about it.
So interesting.
They have to have conversations about it. Heterosexual couples, I believe, probably start their relationships having these conversations, maybe not with much depth, but at least talking about some of the stuff. And then I think the conversations end too early, and they end too early because life keeps happening. What couples aren't recognizing is that the work of emotional labor will continue throughout their whole life cycle, and they don't continue to discuss it. So what I think is, and what I've observed, if you've been married for over 5 years and you continue to be uncomfortable with the division of labor, or you feel that there's no partnership, you've been told more than once to get off his back, or you're being a nag, I believe that these conversations, I believe women are expressing their anxiety, and they're not being heard, or there's this great guy I met, Memorial Weekend. There was an article about don't get divorced, get coached. And it was a story about a man named Matt. I will get his, Matthew Fray, F-R-A-Y. He's in the middle of the country in Ohio. And he has been writing about his divorce. When his divorce happened in 2013, he couldn't understand why his wife was getting so angry by a cup on the countertop. But it wasn't the cup on the countertop. It was the 80 cups she had told him to asked him to use the dishwasher that week and the week before. He saw it as
broke the camel's back.
It's just a cup.
Right.
You know, you're by the sink. Why don't you put it in there? I mean, they would do this dynamic, and she finally said, "The hell with it." And so I think what happens with families is that they stop talking, they become resentful, they are resigned to this. And so what's the solution? A solution is to start out with this list of what it is that you do. Because it's non-threatening. You're not looking over each other's shoulders. You're just going into your separate corners. You're writing things out, and then you can compare notes. I think the person with the most stuff on the list is responsible for coming to understand what they would like to have taken off their list. One of the big challenges in couples, husbands will say, well, if you would just tell me what to do. And that continues to be emotional labor, because now she has to tell him what to do instead of him figuring it out. And then she has to make sure it was done instead of trusting that it'll get done. I mean, it becomes such a weird dynamic, and a lot of women will complain to me in private that it feels like that they're the mom again to their husbands.
I was just going to say, Regina, it really is. I think men in general misplace the husband-wife dynamic with the son-mother dynamic. And especially I think once the wife becomes a mom, she's in that role to the children. And I think the husband, subconsciously or not, and I clearly don't have, like a psychology degree, but just from what I've seen in families, he becomes wanting to get that attention from her and starts acting more childlike.
I mean, he's seeing it. I mean, I think all of this happens.
Yeah.
And but hearing what you said about the pushback that you got when people learned about you bringing on a nanny. I am an advocate of women supporting each other, of course, and to help each other come up with strategies of everything we can outsource.
Work on your strengths only. Like, I think, like you said, it was in me all the time. Who would have known? What you're meant to do in this world is in you. And to be quite honest, my nanny is an amazing former teacher. She knows child education inside and out. And she's doing a better job at that than I ever could, because it's not within me to want to learn. And I'm sorry if that sounds bad, but I get so riveted, but of course love my children beyond earth, moon, and stars.
Right.
But to me, thinking about a complex deal, or how we're going to negotiate that, or how we're going to structure this, or how I can be out there in the world empowering others, that gets me going.
Right.
Figuring out, which play cup to use and researching that put a bullet in my head. I mean, right. Seriously.
Right. No, so outsourcing, if we're not going to find immediate gratification with our counterpart, our partners, our spouses, then and if we can afford it, outsource it. Outsource cooking, outsource birthday cakes, outsource
Instacart, Amazon. Thank you.
Yeah. And what I see happening is that culturally, we are experiencing the acceptable outsourcing. I would imagine that an unacceptable outsourcing project would be sending your nanny with your child to buy school clothes. Do you know what I mean? We have these levels of what is acceptable to hand off and what is really what a mom should do. Is it acceptable to outsource making a homemade cake or cupcakes? I mean, we're seeing
I would say yes.
yeah, well, everything, and because there's so much.
And Regina, too, what is it? Because we can point the finger at men, but I think as women, we need to own up to some of these comments women make to other women, and the daughter-in-law, mother-in-law dynamic, and how, like, we collectively need to be better cheerleaders for each other's success, even if it's not exactly how it was done before.
Right. Yeah, I my doctorate is in women's history, women's studies, and so I have long thought about women's relationship to other women, and I've seen women come together in different movements, from the suffrage movement to abortion, wages. There was a housewives for wages movement. I mean, there's been some great movements where women have come together as a collective. I think we're raised. I think we still raise girls into women to be competitive, and that originated from this misperception of a man shortage, and there's not enough good men to go around, and so women have to compete with each other. I tend to not lump women into a category, and you're right, we absolutely need to support each other. I'm not clear how that support is not coming through, because my experience is that we do support each other, but I know that it doesn't happen. Having conversations with each other. I believe, I don't know, maybe I'm jaded. I think because we have developed an ability to connect in these Zoom rooms, and we're looking over each other's shoulders going, oh my gosh, my kitchen countertop looks like that too. I mean, there's a different kind of connection. I think we're not, culturally, we're not used to transparency, showing our all, being vulnerable. And when our feet are held to the fire, and we're all, there's a lot of anxiety and suffering happening right now with COVID. I'm thinking and experiencing that more and more women are talking with each other about what's really happening at home, and just encourage every single female to take a women's studies course and just understand why
you should give that course.
Huh?
You should be the one giving that course.
I have taught it for years. I used to have to teach women's history in 15 weeks to cover 500 years. Every decade could be a class in and of itself, but and again, the history isn't taught regularly. So how many women go to college never taking anything that has to do with gender?
And how many men? I don't think any of them. Absolutely. Almost none.
So where are women responsible? Honestly, I keep thinking I won't hold women accountable for anything until we lead one of the huge institutions of human life. If women are in charge in law, finance, but it goes back to just being kind. It goes back to we not buying into the stereotype. I think when couples argue about the cup on the counter, they're just you just have this retreat, and now the cup on the counter becomes part of the status quo. You don't want to talk about it. We all need to increase our communication skills, our ability to stay emotionally managed. I mean, emotional management, there's some great books out there. Tara Brach is, she has a book called Radical Acceptance. Another really good one is Daniel Siegel's Mindsight. In order to have these really uncomfortable conversations about what's going on at home, our responsibility is clarity, what is acceptable,
boundaries,
moving away from our idea of perfection and being okay with good enough. There's this wonderful book that got me started on my book. A journalist by the name of Gemma Hartley, Gemma with a J. Her book in 2018 is called Fed Up. Fed Up! And she opens it describing a conversation that she had with her husband. And he said, what do you want for your birthday? And she goes, a deep clean. I want the house deep clean. I want everything. The chandelier, I want everything. And he goes, oh, you sure there's nothing on Amazon? I saw this gorgeous bracelet. She goes, deep clean. I want the deep clean. So he says, good. So on the day of her birthday, she's watching the toddlers while he deep cleans the kitchen and the bathroom. And that wasn't her idea. And she wishes that he had polled their friends on Facebook saying, hey, she wants a deep clean. What should I do? Who should I, And then for 2 days, she writes, she walked past the wrapping paper that was on the floor of the hallway above the attic where it lives, because it was the wrapping paper he used to wrap the bracelet that he also bought her. And for 2 days, she's walking by the wrapping paper and just, her brain's about to explode. On the third day, she gets a step stool and she picks up the box to put it in the attic. He walks by, he goes, why didn't you ask me to do that? And she just goes out of her mind. And so how do you circumvent that? How do you deal with that? Conversations, clear expectations, as clear as you can. Marital counseling. I know, I actually, I became an affiliate member of the LA County Psychological Association because I thought it would be a great place for me to connect with therapists that I can give to my clients for referrals, because we work with a lot of people with brain-based conditions, from the hoarding disorder to ADHD and all that. I was so surprised to learn that all the therapists that I talked to, and I got involved, it was a good number, not one of them talks about, they've never asked about describing the surfaces of the house. What's your bedroom look like? What does the marital bedroom look like? What is the kitchen counter? Describe the physical parts of your home. And I think a lot of clients going into marital therapy will compartmentalize. It's the way they communicate. It's not the pile of laundry on the couch. None of the intake sheets, when you're filling out forms for meeting a therapist, none of them talk about the household. And if your therapist isn't talking about it and you're compartmentalizing, you're not even thinking of bringing it up. I mean, it's a cluster, and I don't think there are any easy answers. But I know that if I have been loading my dishwasher the same way for 10 years, and I'm finally fed up, and I have this great conversation with my spouse that is now his job. I can't be looking over his shoulder to make sure he's doing it right. I just can't, because it's going to be good enough.
It's so funny that you say that, because I will tell you, as you know, we were in a condo in Santa Monica and moved to Evergreen, Colorado, where we now have a much bigger house, 5 times bigger than the condo. And, it's funny because the marital room, I'm like, whatever, he still has his shit there, fine. But my office, this is like my space.
Yeah.
This is my haven. And I'm even here, like seeing in myself that I get out of sorts. Should he come in here or should he try to leave shit here? It's just not acceptable in my space.
Right.
Which is, maybe everyone needs that kind of a space in their home.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's those, you said the word, you said the exact perfect word, the boundaries. The boundaries are itness. And if you could go into a relationship with boundaries and whatever you have to do to hold them. And of course, relationship, not every relationship is 50-50 all the time. It's 70-30, it's 60-40, it's 90-10. It really depends on what's happening. But there are, if you can come up with certain
parameters,
unfungible, parameters that the loading and the unloading of the dishwasher is just not my responsibility. I read one author, she said, stop thanking family members for thankless jobs, meaning the table always gets set. If a woman says to the husband, if a wife says to the husband or child, thank you for setting the table, it means that that's still her job. And she's thanking them instead of giving the family member an opportunity to own that job.
Totally.
That's their job.
So as we raise children, I think we should be very big proponents of saying, this is what you do.
Right. Right.
Period.
Period.
Make them better parents.
Right. Or to understand where the skill strength is.
Right.
And again, I get these comments from clients and recently one woman said, well, my husband started, he was going to do the laundry, but he says I'm better at it. And so it came back to me, and it's like, well.
And they do this. I mean, my husband doesn't change diapers because I'm so good at it. and they also know how to.
The manner born.
They know how to talk to us in a way to make us do it because they're stroking that I want to be the perfect woman, which we all need.
Yeah.
So it's psychological warfare when they come. But I am hopeful that through this pandemic and what's been happening in the world, that we as all people are able to truly come together and say, like, wow, this is the amount she's taken on. And I don't want any person, I mean, it breaks my heart. I have so many friends who are lawyers, doctors, and they have chosen to stay at home because they're not getting the buy-in from their spouse about how much work it takes to raise a family.
Right. That's the damn shame. And nature or nurture. I remember, so I read Gemma Hartley's book Fed Up in 2018, but I've been very attuned how women talk about their lives just because of my education background. And right when I started organizing, I was talking with a client, and she was expressing so much despair and anxiety. She felt like a bad wife and mother, and nobody can ever come over, and the house is always a mess. And I looked at her, I said, honey, just because you have a uterus doesn't mean to the man are born. One has nothing to do with the other.
Right.
It's really about one's skill set. It's how your brain is wired. If you're not good at organizing the cycle, the 5 steps to do laundry, sort, wash, dry, fold, put away, they kind of have to go in that order.
Right.
If you've got a brain type where planning and processing and sequencing are not your skill set, you're gonna have a hard time with the laundry. And we don't recognize these, what I call invisible invisible challenges. You know, there's a whole literature on visible and invisible identities, right? So you may not know by looking at me that I'm a lesbian. And so someone might say that this is an invisible identity. If I presented different, really short hair, no makeup, you know, if I embrace like the butch dynamic, you go, lesbian. You wouldn't know that somebody has multiple sclerosis. You may not know somebody has Parkinson's. So there's these invisible and visible abilities, disabilities, identities. If you're somebody with ADHD, the chances are very good you have a cluttered home, because maintaining cleared space requires really good time management skills, really good emotional management. You need emotional management when you're going through a box of old love letters to be able to put them into context. Oh, this was, I remember this guy, you know, he was great, but we just didn't hit it off. Instead of looking at the letters going, wow, this could have, you know, I really could have,
right.
Yeah, this could have been my life, you know, all of that. And you just put the letters, you just box them up and put them to the side. ADHD is executive function dysfunction, and executive function is planning, processing, sequencing, time management, emotion management. It's got less to do with who you are as female and more to do with how your brain is wired. And so the book I'm producing on this subject, it was going to be focused on women, ADHD, and emotional labor, but I'm really going to move away from the language of ADHD and just tuck it into the language of the executive function of the brain, and how the brain is wired will determine or help you to consider how to delegate, why sitting down and paying the bills may not be your skill set, because it requires a certain type of focus and concentration. So who in the family can do that?
Right. It's amazing that you say that, because, you know, I'm even thinking of myself, and for me, I was always excellent at school, because school is, there's this thing due at this point,
right?
And get it. So my brain type, and taking, like, I do a million self-assessments. I really want to delve in and know thyself, and I think everyone should.
Right.
And for me, when there is a deadline, and there is no one better to get it done faster, more efficient.
And you.
It's like in the ether and like willy-nilly, blah, blah, blah. Not for me. You know, it just doesn't happen.
Right.
And I think a lot of people are surprised because they could be the overachievers in school, where there's a clear, definitive, like, I'm doing well if I get an A.
Right.
I'm doing well if, you know, every paper, every test gets this grade, as opposed to what's the day-to-day to get. And I think schools are also teaching us, realistically, if you have a great memory and ability to cram,
right,
you're going to do great in school.
Right. Well, I mean, I look at school with, I'm kind of jaded. I was in school for a really long time.
Yeah.
I come out of school and I start this work as an organizer, and I recognize that school does not prepare you for real life, in that the one thing about real life is there's always paper coming through your front door.
Oh my God. Stop the mail.
Always.
Please stop the mail.
And nobody is taught what to do with it. They're not taught about, you know, nobody learns in K through 12 that once something enters your home, think of its exit strategy. When is it going to leave your home? What do you do with paper? How do you, you know, these we hear about sociologists and social workers talk about ADLs, activity for daily living, which is wash, bathe, teeth, and all of that, doing your dishes, but they don't talk about how to successfully encounter paper and stuff. It's just not a conversation.
Regina, the bomb that just went off in my head of like, so we just moved, right? My house is still boxes. I unpacked the whole damn house, but it's like, I'm waiting for my husband to take out the boxes. And now I think back, he never opens a piece of mail. So he just doesn't know what to do. So
right.
Instead of waiting for him to do it realistically, I should just take it out because it's not going to get done otherwise.
Right.
But it's to your point of, if someone else was always handling that for a human being,
right,
just because you're now married and in a relationship of being a husband, father, wife, mother, doesn't mean you're all of a sudden born with these abilities.
Right.
They take time.
And it's exactly that. It's an ability. It is a skill. And because the work in the household is unwaged, it's the private sphere, it's invisible. I mean, I take this back to the 1830s, and there was in the new world of education and female education, there was a very famous woman named Catherine Beecher, and she's the founder of household management. And she's coming at this, so it's about 50 years post-American Revolution, and now they're creating this country, and the founders, who are the leaders? Where do we get future leaders? Where do the leaders come from? And Catherine says, our future leaders come from a well-ordered home. And the well-ordered home is going to be the responsibility of the middle-class white American housewife. And in this description, what Beecher is really doing is putting the weight of the republic on the white middle-class shoulders.
And it's never been taken off.
And they're responsible for making sure they don't raise juvenile delinquents.
Wow.
So now they're responsible for creating and maintaining a well-ordered home, which requires all the skills of the executive function of your brain. And I think of all the women over the last 2 centuries with ADHD, they feel like they have failed their sex miserably.
Damn you, Catherine Beecher!
It's stunning. It's stunning. And you are right on. The weight has never been taken off their shoulders. And it's still there. We continue to raise girls into women and boys into men very similarly. And I know there are outliers, and I know that there are I know that there are outliers. There are amazing husbands who are carrying all the emotional. I mean, that they mix it up, but by and large, and I look at I have an emotional labor survey on my website, and I need more diversity on there, because right now it's dominated by white middle-class entrepreneurial women who are not only shouldering their entire companies, but the weight of the burden at home. But yeah, there continues to be that crazy imbalance. I mean, type the words emotional labor into a Google search, and it's mind-boggling how much information is out there with a lot of
really
tips.
Talks about.
Yeah, but the tips don't address how the brain is wired. So, if the tip is, deal with your mail as it comes in, well, if you got an armful of groceries and a baby, how are you going to deal with the mail when it comes in? You know, so it's you got to have time management skill. You know, you have to have the executive function skills to be able to do whatever book says this is what you do.
And it's also no shame to be like, I suck at that. I'm an employee, you, and you do that. And we know how to do that in business, or at least we try. But in our personal lives, we have this like blockade. And the truth is, we are who we are at every point. Like you are who you are, who you are.
Yeah, always.
Always.
And because the work of the home is not only in the private sphere versus the public sphere of commerce and industry, the private sphere, the hearth, the home, this is where where we get our calm, where love and companionship and family responsibility, the private sphere. It's also where the majority of unwaged work happens. And because the work isn't waged, it's not seen as valuable, right? Because we tend to value things more when it costs more. We do.
So you know what, ladies and gentlemen, let's start charging for it. I mean, seriously, if you put a price tag on this is what's going to cost, then
the studies are out there. The studies are out there. If every single homemaker walked off the job today, to replace her would be well over $150,000 a year. The studies are out there.
Easily. Regina, I hire people who do it on iota of what I do. And they're still and I send them an email a day and they're like, I feel like I'm working around the clock. I'm like, I feel like you're never working. What to do, right? And look, we've had an amazing conversation. We could go on for hours.
I know.
And I just want to thank you for giving your wisdom to our viewers. And I hope that we actually do this again because there's so much good stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you again for being who you are and lighting your beautiful light into the world.
Back at you, sister.
See you soon.
All right, honey. Bye-bye.
Bye.